where we are. We are in the Tokyo Big Sight Convention Center, which is home to the International Broadcast Center, which you would find at any Olympic Games. But in this case, you'd find fewer journalists, fewer people inside the International Broadcast Center. CBC has sent fewer people. We're all stationed here. The crews come and go throughout the day, depending what we're covering. But we're in this location just near Tokyo Bay for the duration of the games, in and out as we cover the events, Michael.
Okay, come and go, in and out. But what does that actually mean, Thomas? What type of restrictions are on your movements right now, given that there's still a state of emergency in Tokyo as they deal with the ongoing pandemic?
I arrived on Sunday. Our colleagues here have been arriving for several days now, but all of us coming from Canada or other countries, we're under a 14-day sort of soft quarantine where our movements are watched. We actually have to submit a pre-planned activity list even before we came to the games to say we're going to go to these 10 or 12 venues or activities over the course of our coverage for those 14 days, especially, and throughout the entire games. So mostly my days so far have been going between the hotel on a media bus organized by Olympic officials here to the International Broadcast Center with other CBC crews, and then in some cases going for shoots on location with a videographer colleague, but inside a vehicle and only to approved locations. So they're trying to minimize as much as possible our interactions with the Japanese public.
Okay. With that, I want to bring in some viewer questions because people have been sending them in to us, beginning with Akahane, who on Instagram is asking this. And this is something that you actually filed on last night, Thomas. How does the humidity feel like in Tokyo? Also going on to say, how do athletes manage? So maybe let's break that up. Let's begin with the humidity and then move on to, the impact that actually has on athletes.
Yeah, it's very hot. Past few days, it's been around the mid-30s with the humidity feeling closer to 40. That has made it more difficult for athletes to get ready. Many members of Team Canada, especially in the long-distance events, the beach volleyball and some other athletes, they got ready in different locations or took part in sort of special preparations to get ready for the intense heat and humidity. I was speaking with a heat and health expert just yesterday who was explaining how with the heat, I mean, the body can deal with that, but the added humidity, when it gets to 50% humidity or more, that makes it more difficult for the body to control the sweat, and so it makes it, makes us all more at a higher risk of heat exhaustion. And you can imagine what that is like when you're running a marathon. So that is why, for instance, the long distance races have been moved out of Tokyo to places that are supposed to be cooler, but certainly that's something that's on our radar. Just want to show you among my props here, Michael. These are salt chewable candy tablets which dissolve in water. Everyone coming here to the games was given a small gift pack by organizers, and among that gift pack, these chewable tablets, which apparently are good when you sweat. Haven't tried them yet.
Salt candy, Thomas. Actually, no, listen, I get it. You're going to need it to stay hydrated, given the heat and the humidity, as you say. So I also want to bring in a question here, because you were talking about the movements and trying to protect people from infection of COVID-19, both of course, people in Tokyo and those going in and out for the games. And to that, I want to bring in a question. This is from a viewer by the name of Terry. He actually emailed us, and Terry wants to know, are the athletes allowed to go to events and cheer on their fellow Olympians?
The answer is no. The athletes, members of the general public, in general, for events here in the Tokyo area, cannot go to events. These are essentially going on behind closed doors, and the athletes themselves are under similar restrictions as we are in terms of coming and going. And I would even say they may even be more restricted than we are, because we're here to go to events and cover them in person. The athletes can simply go to their own events, so they may be under even more restrictions than us, Michael.
So what does that mean then? Do they have to essentially just go to an event location and then just chill out at the Olympic Village?
Yeah, so in terms of the Olympic Village, first of all, the athletes generally would be, sort of starting to crowd in there now, and the population of the Olympic Village would be growing. But athletes have been told they're only welcome in the Athletes Village 5 days before their event starts. So in some cases, athletes may have traveled to Japan already, but in an effort to control the spread of the coronavirus, organizers have told athletes that they're not welcome early in the Athletes Village, and once their events are done, they are expected within a day or two to fly out of the country. There are a list of other restrictions, or at least suggestions, strong suggestions from Japanese Olympic organizers here for athletes, including if you want to have a drink, you want to have a beer, you can have a beer in the Olympic Village, but please do so alone. There was a suggestion that kind of went viral online in recent days about athletes getting intimate in what are effectively cardboard beds. And the suggestion was that the beds were made of cardboard so that there could not be more than one person in the bed at one time. That is proven false. It's in fact for recycling purposes.
Oh, okay, good to know. Listen, I'm going to bring in a question here. This is from Colin on YouTube, and this is what Colin wants to know. When do you see Tokyo locals? Are they welcoming to those associated with the Olympics?
I can only go by what public opinion polls here in Japan and some other indicators are saying. For instance, like I said, I've been here since Sunday. I haven't been able to go out in the streets and speak to members of the public. I've only sort of come in contact with staff at the hotel, staff at some of the cafeteria restaurants we have here at the International Broadcast Center. So they're obviously very welcoming. The level of hospitality here has been, it's unparalleled, but public opinion polls have consistently shown in recent weeks that a majority of the Japanese population does not think that the games should be held. They don't think that organizers will be able to safely hold these games so that COVID-19 doesn't spread at a higher rate to the general population. I will say we have not felt that from the population, but again, we've not been in contact with folks out and about because of the 14-day soft quarantine that we as international travelers have to follow.
One last question here, at least for you and I, before this moves on to the social media pages. Thomas, this is coming to us from Danny on Instagram, and it's interesting. He's asking, how is security, would you say? And it's interesting because, of course, security always an issue at the Olympics, but the pandemic must add a different layer of concern when it comes to security.
Yeah, walking in just here to the International Broadcast Center every morning, I have to show another prop I have here. I have to show my ID, my official accreditation for the Olympics, put this through a scanner. I have to take off my mask, which I'm wearing all day here, just took it off to speak to you on camera here, but I have to take that off for a facial scan. Also have to get my temperature checked every day. That happens, and we also have to put all our belongings that we're carrying on us through a metal detector. So that's from a security standpoint. Once we're here at work every day, we have to fill out, we have to complete a saliva test every day for COVID-19. Have to spit in a vial. Sorry for those listening while having your breakfast at home, but have to do this COVID test every day, obviously for the safety and security of folks here at the Broadcast Center and the wider Japanese population.
Okay. Well, listen, Thomas, that's it for us here on CBC News Network, but we should point out that you'll still be answering questions online. So for those who are interested, you can keep following Thomas and follow the conversation on CBC News Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter pages. Thomas, when you do taste that salt candy, by all means, send us a photo. I want to see your face when you actually do that.
I will. I don't know what to expect yet. Maybe tomorrow.
Well, you know, I like salt a little too much. Okay, Thomas, you take care. We have more Olympic coverage for people at home ahead of tomorrow's opening ceremony. That's going to come for you right here on CBC News Network, so do stay with us.
Thank you, Michael. And thanks for those of you joining us on social media channels here. It's Thomas with CBC News coming to you from Tokyo, taking your questions online. We're just going to take a second to reset here to make sure you see us and hear us, and I'm going to be taking some questions. They're going to be sent to me from the crew in Toronto on my cell phone here. So let me pick that up and see what questions are coming in. We thank you, by the way, for sending in your questions, those who've done so already, and we thank you for tuning in. Let's see here. Stella on Instagram asking about the food and the restrictions at the food hall. I can only speak personally about what I have been experiencing the past few days here at the International Broadcast Center and sort of the interactions here. I will say that initially, before the pandemic struck, there was room for many other restaurants, but I think at this point, there are 3 cafeteria-style restaurants here upstairs at the broadcast center for all the international broadcasters that have come from around the world to this building to broadcast from the games. There is physical distancing, there is masking, and there is plexiglass installed between you and the person you're eating with. So obviously you take off your mask to eat, but even at that point, even if you're sitting with someone, it's not like in a restaurant. What I've become, what we've become used to, certainly back in Canada, is you're able to eat with someone you know, but you can eat with them here just behind plexiglass, and I would imagine it is a similar situation for the athletes. MS on Instagram asking about the overall atmosphere. I will answer that. I can sort of answer that in 2 ways. First of all, there's excitement in the air here at the International Broadcast Center, knowing that we're 24 hours away from the opening ceremony. It is my first Olympic Games, but my understanding from other colleagues who've covered games in the past is, there's a certain build-up to that moment where the athletes start coming into the stadium on the day of the opening ceremony, and we certainly feel that, even though we are not in contact with the general population, even though we can't go out and speak to folks on the street, even though there aren't people exchanging pins. This is something that would normally happen at the Olympics and among media outlets covering the Olympics. There would be an exchange of Olympic pins, or we'd be giving someone a CBC pin in exchange for pin from another country. That's not really happening this year, and so are other traditional events that would be associated with the Olympics that are just fun. They're part of the whole experience, not happening this year, of course, due to COVID. There's masking, there's physical distancing, and just a lot less sort of hanging out, if you will. Richard McKay on CBC.ca says he lives in Japan, and he's asking about the rising COVID cases in Tokyo, and he's suggesting that testing levels are reduced when cases rise. Interesting point. I don't know about the basis for that, but Richard, I understand you live in Japan. There are certainly rising COVID cases in Tokyo. We've seen that in recent days, certainly since we have been here. Today, COVID cases in Tokyo approaching around 2,000. They were at about 1,000 in recent days. These are highs. This is the highest level that COVID cases have been at in Tokyo for several months. This despite the fact that all the foreign travelers who've been coming into the country, thousands of them pouring into the airports here in Tokyo, we all have to go through COVID tests. We all have to be swabbed, go through PCR testing twice before boarding the plane. So there are a list of COVID measures in place, but indeed the COVID cases have been rising. The fear for many people, of course, is that if there is a cluster in the Olympic Village, or if international journalists or crews or staff bring cases of COVID into the country, inevitably we interact with members of the general public who are staffing either the International Broadcast Center or the press center nearby, or the Olympic events or the hotels, and that will spread to the wider community. Is that what is going on right now? I mean, I don't have the epidemiological data to say either way. But it is something that the Japanese population, from what we understand, is quite worried about, and will be watching throughout the Olympics. Organizers just in the past couple days have said they're not ruling out a last-minute cancellation. But again, we're 24 hours away from the opening ceremony. Any sort of cancellation at this point seems less and less likely. MMB on YouTube is asking how long the opening ceremony will be. We're hearing it's going to be perhaps more than 3 hours. For those of you who are familiar with past Olympic opening ceremonies, these things tend to go long. You may be thinking at home it might be shorter, more condensed, because there are going to be fewer athletes and fewer people taking part in the ceremonies. From what we understand, it may simply look like, you know, when you see a country with a smaller delegation come in, they're still just as enthusiastic. That's probably what we're going to see tomorrow. Smaller delegations, Team Canada expecting about 30 to 40 delegates going to take part in the parade tomorrow during that the opening ceremony as they parade in, wave the flag. They're all going to be masked, and there's going to be a certain level of physical distancing for sure. But it may go long. There are going to be around 950 people in the stadium, from what we understand. This is a stadium that would normally have room for about 70,000 people if this were a normal year, but with this being COVID years, it is not going to be normal. We'll be anxious to see what it's all going to look like tomorrow. HL Newfield on Instagram asking about vaccination and why it's not mandatory to attend the Olympics. The Olympic organizers made the point that, first of all, they tried to make vaccines available to anyone, or at least the athletes, traveling to Tokyo for these games. That doesn't seem to have been, the uptake doesn't seem to have been 100%. Our understanding from Olympic organizers, and I'm not sure what they're basing this on, but they say that they expect 85% of the people in the Olympic Village are going to be fully vaccinated. Of course, the general population here in Tokyo and in Japan, the vaccination rate is much lower. But the point that Olympic organizers have made is they didn't want to put poorer countries at a disadvantage during these games and make it mandatory to be vaccinated. We've heard from some athletes from some countries, including the United States, that they didn't want to get vaccinated because they had fears about what it might do to their body. These are elite athletes. There was no suggestion, of course, that they would be harmed in any way by being vaccinated, but that is the fear we understand from a minority of athletes, and we don't, of course, don't have the breakdown of the total number of people who are coming in who are or are not vaccinated. Yeah, Christine on CBC.ca asking about the refugee Olympic team, several of them being sponsored to come to Canada after the Games. Indeed, there are a few Olympic athletes part of the refugee delegation that will be coming to Canada after the Games, and we'll certainly have coverage of that in the coming days. I believe they begin competing in the track and field events next week, so I don't want to spoil the news for next week, but it is interesting. It will be interesting to watch the refugee delegation or the refugee team here at the Olympics, who've come from different parts of the world, who fled their countries of origin for various reasons, and are still getting the chance to take part in these games. A real interesting initiative, of course, that it's not the first time this happens, but it's growing during these games, and something to watch for in our coverage, I promise. Just looking through the comments here, you can keep the questions coming on our social media channels. We thank you for tuning in, and for everyone who has asked questions so far. We're trying to get to as many as we can. Heather on Facebook asking about Tokyo being so far behind in vaccination. Yes, the numbers are low. The last I checked, about 2/3 of the Japanese population is unvaccinated. Why is that? I mean, I think there are several factors involved, political and social factors, among them a hard time getting foreign-made vaccines into Japan. I understand that there are approved vaccines here. One that is a collaboration between Moderna and a Japanese country. Of course, Pfizer and the AstraZeneca vaccine that we know in Canada. They are all here, but the uptake has been slow because it seems of the number of doses that are coming into the country. Japan certainly far behind Canada in that vaccination rate. Yeah, lots of questions about just the relevance of the Olympics. Patricia asking about the relevance of the Olympics. It is a lot of money during a pandemic, but why no public? So you're alluding to something with that's multi-pronged here. I will try to sort of take a stab at that. Yes. The Olympic Games are a huge expense for the Japanese government. Initially, when this was proposed upwards of 8 years ago, 8 or 9 years ago, the plan, according to Tokyo 2020 organizers, was that it was going to cost about $7.5 billion US. In the end, the latest estimates are that it's going to cost about twice as much, upwards of $15 billion US. Of course, a few billion of that is because of the delay. This was supposed to happen a year ago, only happening now, and plus COVID measures. What they're calling countermeasures here are costing a few $billion. There have been several government audits as well here in Japan that have suggested that the cost overruns are quite substantial, and that so far these games could in fact cost upwards of $25 billion US. So I'm sure there will be many stories from us and other media outlets in the coming months about the cost of these Olympics. And of course, organizers are not getting the revenue from the stadiums and the venues where there would normally be upwards of tens of thousands of spectators attending these games, paying to enter, paying for merchandise and beer and popcorn. That's not the case this year. And yes, you're right. There are questions about the relevance of the Olympics going forward. And there are political questions surrounding the Beijing Games, which are just a few months away, the next Winter Games in 2022. So certainly something that we'll be watching for and reporting on in the coming days. Just going through the questions here. Canada has 2 flag bearers. Just to answer Ursula's question on Facebook, 2 flag bearers who's a rugby player and a basketball player. It's the first time that these are going to be a male athlete and a female athlete coming from different team sports. They are going to be, you'll see them part of the opening ceremony tomorrow. Of course, we're going to be broadcasting that on CBC TV and on the CBC Olympics app. It's going to be quite different this year. The delegation is going to be a lot smaller. There's probably going to be, the athletes are going to be enthusiastic, but overall, you're not going to hear the loud roar of the crowd that you normally would. There may be some piped-in crowd noise, as we've been hearing at some of the events, or at least has been promised. But I think there's still going to be some surprises tomorrow as well. Just to explain again, for those who tuned in after we started here, we're coming to you from Tokyo, from the Olympic Games. This is the International Broadcast Center inside Tokyo Big Site Convention Center on Tokyo Bay. This is the CBC and Radio-Canada sort of operation center, if you will, where our crews are based throughout the games. We can watch the events as they happen on the big screens behind us. We can watch what's happening back in Canada, and it is a bit of a challenge. It's been interesting with the time difference. I'm still adjusting myself. I've been here since Sunday, still trying to make the calculations as to what time it is back home. I'm used to Eastern time in Toronto. We're 13 hours ahead of Eastern time, so I'm talking to you. It's Thursday night here in Tokyo. It's Thursday morning where you are. So it's an interesting experience so far. Really enjoying it, despite everything that's going on with COVID and everything. We're trying to make the most of it. Bernadette on Instagram. Oh, here's a good question. How often are you and athletes tested? I can speak for myself. Athletes are tested regularly, certainly, but just to grab this bag of vials I have here. This was given to me as soon as I arrived here at the International Broadcast Center earlier this week. Not just me, all my colleagues as well. Depending on our activity plan, the list of events and venues that we had to apply to attend and cover during our time here, we were given a list of dates that we had to do a saliva test. So here's my whole calendar of my time in Tokyo, and I actually have to get tested every day. Go figure. So every morning I arrive here at the broadcast center, take a vial out of a bag, scan a code, and well, I spit in a vial. And that is my daily COVID test. I had to do, as everyone did who flew in from abroad, had to do 2 nasal swabs before boarding the flight to Tokyo, 96 hours and 72 hours before the flight. Then upon arrival at the airport in Tokyo, we had to do a saliva test and wait for the results. We also had to show the paper proof of our 2 previous nasal swab tests. The whole process at the airport for us, since there were so many people arriving at the same time, including Team Canada members, the whole process took about 8 hours. For me, it was a 31-hour trip from home in Toronto to the hotel room here in Tokyo. Not complaining in any way, just trying to give you some color from the ground here and what it's been like in this era of COVID-19. Melody on Instagram asking about vaccination. Is every Canadian athlete fully vaccinated? No. Whether we don't actually have the vaccination status of every athlete here. Our understanding is most would be fully vaccinated, and there was a program where the Canadian Olympic Committee was trying to get the athletes fully vaccinated as much as possible before they flew in, but we don't have the final vaccination rates. Again, to be clear, it is not mandatory. Olympic organizers didn't want to make it mandatory for athletes and staff and coaches and media to be fully vaccinated or even partially vaccinated before arriving because they didn't want to discourage or didn't want to harm perhaps poorer countries who have not had the access to vaccines that other countries such as Canada have had. And that's, controversial, you might say. Will spectators be allowed to enter the stadium? Surinder on YouTube asking about spectators in the stadium. Members of the public in general will not be allowed in the stadium. This is a 70,000 seat stadium that is going to be hosting the opening ceremony tomorrow. It is largely behind closed doors, but of course there will be a few people there, upwards of 950. If all goes to plan, we will be there in person to broadcast for some of the early coverage tomorrow on World Report, on CBC Radio and on CBC News Network. But you can expect some of those 950 people include athletes, they include VIPs, they perhaps sponsors. We know that some Japanese executives of companies have dropped out, said they won't be attending, which gives you a sense of the sort of the toxicity of the Tokyo 2020 brand here in Japan and the level of opposition that people here have to the games. In recent days, the CEO of Toyota, the automaker, huge Olympic sponsor, they have said that the CEO will not be attending, as well as the electronics giant Panasonic, their top executive will not be attending the games, which is unusual, knowing that these companies pump millions of dollars into the games. They want to be associated with the games, which are usually popular. People like to watch, people like to take it in, except this year things are a little different for many people due to COVID-19. Just looking at your questions here being sent in by my colleague Alicia, passing them on to me. I appreciate that. Thank you for all the questions coming in. The Paralympic Games, question about the Paralympics. Let me double check the start date. August 24th is when the Paralympic Games will begin here in Tokyo after the end of the Summer Games, the Olympics, which end on, Ryan, August 8th, is it, or August 9th? August 8th, I believe. I'm sure that you can also Google that for sure. Sorry, we fly out August 9th, and I think the closing ceremony is the day before August 8th. I'm someone's giving me the thumbs up here. Ryan, my colleague here behind the camera, is giving me the thumbs up. The Olympics end on August 8th, and then the Paralympics begin on August 24th. We're taking your questions. We still have time for another few questions here. Last question has just been passed on to me from Toronto. Well, it's a good question, and unfortunately, I don't have the answer, but I can partially answer it. So Bernadette on Instagram asking, how many condoms did the IOC order for the 2020 games? I don't, unfortunately, have the figure off the top of my head, but I can tell you that normally people who cover these things, the Olympic Games in the past, have said that it's sort of a signature of the games. Many condoms are passed out, and oftentimes they are used in the Olympic Village. Officially, the message from organizers this time is take them home. Prevent the spread of COVID-19. Thank you for joining us on our social media channels today. And for those of you who were watching on CBC News Network a little earlier as well, thanks for all your questions. Thank you to Alicia and Cheryl in Toronto for passing on the questions, and to Mari here in Tokyo for helping out, and Ryan behind the camera. Great to talk to you. Great to get a sense of what our audience in Canada is interested in finding out about. We will include all of this in our coverage in the coming days. The Olympic ceremony, of course, tomorrow here in Tokyo. We'll talk to you then.